So obviously, I just want to talk to everybody about after the apprenticeship. I'm going to go through just introduce myself a little bit and how I've come to be where I am. Obviously, just talking about just maximizing your opportunity within an apprenticeship and using the apprenticeship as a launch pad, and obviously looking at what you need to do in order to sort of get into your kind of creative marketing careers after during and after the apprenticeship process. Um, Sorry, my advanced button's not. Ah, there we go. That's it. So, yeah, I'm the marketing curriculum lead. Um, but obviously, I, I've been at Creative Alliance for 6 years, coming up to 6 years now. And before that, I started my career. I've been throughout sort of marketing. Kind of started off at Transport for London, so working in marketing, creative, and worked in big organisations. Also, just before I started at Creative Alliance, I was also running my own sort of agency. So I've got experience from working in big organisations, smaller organisations, but also from running my own business. So I understand what is required to sort of work and sort of progress within a career in sort of marketing and creative, but also what I'm looking for as a manager when I'm hiring creative talent or sort of marketing talent as well. So got more years than I'd like to share with you, experience out in the field. But one thing that that really enthuses me as well is being able to kind of share that with apprentices, and able to understand what they're going through within their roles, but also understand what their requirements are within the organizations that they work for, and how to get the best out of them as well. Um, so obviously, if you're in a career in an apprenticeship role, it's important to sort of see that as a launch pad. So ideally at Creative Alliance, we've got a really good sort of record of securing apprentices within the role that they start at, and from there, from there on, them getting, sort of full-time positions, but it's not guaranteed. And obviously, we need to sort of assume that from the start. So it's about, just doing what you can throughout your apprenticeship as a launch pad. So, treating your apprenticeship like an audition. Everything you do within your role is important. So again, your enthusiasm, a reliability, curiosity, creativity, your ability to kind of show your initiative, all of those things are essential. And obviously, if you've got an apprenticeship role and it's a wonderful role and you want to secure that, then all of that will be taken into consideration. So, whether there's a position for you at the end or not, that is going to impact whether you get a really good reference, and all of that kind of thing. So it's really important just to think about all of the kind of, yeah, just the sort of things, but like, reliability, curiosity, bringing ideas to the table. It's all really important, because yeah, people notice, and it might not be your line manager, it might be other colleagues within the organization, it might be clients, it might be anyone. So at any point within your apprenticeship, there are opportunities. So you need to sort of make sure that it is sort of like an audition. Um, and you know building on top of that is evidence of your impact. So what impact are you making within your apprenticeship? That evidence is great because you can use it in, I'm going on to talk about sort of your profile and everything like that, but obviously that evidence is really important. So you know if you're having an impact, campaigns that you're working on, skills learned, any kind of training that you've done that makes, it's there just to kind of build that evidence. So again, that evidence, you need to start sharing that. And again, if you're working within an organization and you want to stay there, it's good that you can prove that you're having an impact and prove that you're having a positive input into all of the things that you're working on, whatever they may be, and that you can show that you've actually learned, that you've developed. You can see a progress from sort of over a period of time, and that really helps to kind of sort of just utilize and for you to use, and you can see your own progress, but it also gets noticed by others. Um, Again, already kind of mentioned this before, but it is also about, just showing your initiative, being able to support any kind of improvements, whether they're creative improvements, campaign improvements, whatever they happen to be. Again, being creative, it might be that been asked to do a task, but if and again, that might be, creating social media posts for a social media campaign. But to come up with various ideas so that you can present those to your client, to your boss, to your colleagues, or whatever it is, to show that you've not just kind of done what you've been asked to do, but that actually you're thinking creatively and you're bringing in your personality and your input as well. And just being able to present ideas. So they might not be, well, they can be creative ideas, but they can also be, why are we doing it like this? Could we do it like this? So you can, you're bringing that initiative to the table within your role. And as an apprentice, that stuff is it's essential, and it really gets noticed. From my perspective, when I'm doing reviews with my apprentices, and I'm talking to the line managers, and they're saying, this apprentice is, they've been brilliant. They're not only doing what we've been asking them to do, but they're really showing their initiative. They're bringing new ideas. They're not just bringing new ideas, but they're presenting them to us as almost kind of fully formed ideas, so that we can maybe take those on and present them to a client. So, that stuff is really good. And again, even if you don't get kept on within your role, that's just really positive stuff that you can use for, for a recommendation or a reference, or just to help kind of springboard you into your next opportunity. Um, and the best time to start building your professional brand is now. So again, if you start on an apprenticeship, you need to just start building that professional, building your own sort of professional personal brand. So think about, all of the elements that might sort of get seen in future. So LinkedIn is absolutely essential. So again, that evidence of impact, that can really come into your LinkedIn profile. Show any training that you've done, any skills that you've learned, get them onto LinkedIn, start to build that profile now. And again, I say to my apprentices, at the start of their apprenticeship, you need to be thinking about this now. And, some of them, might say to me, but I really want to stay at this role. I want to stay here in this company, and that's really important to me. Why should I be building a LinkedIn profile? That can support you within your role, within your organization. I mean, we all at Creative Alliance like to share our good news, like to share, all of the kind of initiatives that we're doing. We like to share any new kind of apprenticeship standards that we introduce into the program at Creative Alliance. So we all utilize our LinkedIn to sort of help get that message out. So James and I are often kind of bouncing LinkedIn posts around just to kind of share that presence. So it's not just about your kind of personal profile. It's about you being able to kind of just have that presence out there. So the more you can, you start that now, that LinkedIn profile presence will just be, it'll just grow and grow and grow. Online portfolio, whatever, however you want to present yourself, whether that's through social media, through, through a third party website, building your own website, or, however you want to build a digital portfolio, that's what you need to start thinking about as well. So start to pull those, even ideas within a portfolio, even, things that might not have been published or not have gone out, but that you've worked on and that you're really happy with and that you're really proud of, start to pull them into your portfolio, get them onto your, create yourself a, whether it's a, a sort of a personal brand Instagram profile, so you can start to build that. Because again, if someone contacts you um, and says, "Oh, I'm really interested in your work or whatever it is, can I see it?" Then you've got it there and it's ready. And like I said, you might want to stay within your role at that apprenticeship, but if the time comes at the end of your apprenticeship and unfortunately there isn't a position for you, and that does happen. So you've got all of that work ready, and you're not running around like a headless chicken trying to do it. You can do it in your own time, in your own way, and you can just build it up organically, and start writing a blog. Again, if you're a marketer, from my perspective, written communications is just as important as the kind of visual communications. So, start writing a blog, start putting your ideas down. Again, some of these blogs, you might post them on, on your own personal portfolio website, but, you can just get those ideas out there. So that's really important to sort of just think about any idea you can to build your own personal brand. Um, and the best time to start is now. So, that's really essential. So this is an interview technique. So we call it the STAR method. So STAR is an acronym and it stands for situation, task, action, and result. But this is really good for you to start thinking about, some of those previous things. So again, if you're thinking about, evidence of your impact, showing your initiative, and obviously building your professional brand, it's good to think about this STAR method, because it really allows you to kind of look at what you're doing and show how you're making an impact, how you're, and again, you can use this when you're having interviews or when you're networking and you're talking to people. So if, people are talking to you about what you're doing within your role, you can say, well, I'm working on this campaign and these are the results. So the results are really important. So the STAR method is, just briefly go through it quickly. It's set the scene within the situation. The task is, what did you need to do? The actions are, what you did. And obviously, the result is the impact and the outcome that you've had within that particular project or that particular piece of creative activity or that marketing campaign or whatever it happens to be. So again, set the scene, describe the context of the situation of a brief that you're working on. What were you asked to do? Um, what did you need to do? Again, this could be just a single piece of work. It could be an entire website redesign that you've done, or it could be a multifaceted advertising campaign that you're working on. But obviously, the sort of task, the context is really important, because that explains all of those different responsibilities that you had to work on. Um, the actions is, what did you do? So again, this is about you using your initiative, using your creative skills, using your sort of, all of those things. And again, it's about you. So again, if you're working for an agency, or you've got an apprenticeship with a marketing company or wherever that happens to be, this isn't about them. They might be the best agency or the best company in the world at doing what they do, but what have you done? What is the impact that you have made, and how have you kind of, been proactive, used your initiative, been resilient in order to push this particular piece of work through? And then, you know, the most important side of this is what is the result? What impact have you had? And try and quantify that with some data or some evidence. So again, have you, increased reach on a particular campaign? Did you get, an extraordinary number of views or, sort of engagement within a video or a piece of activity or whatever that happens to be. So if you can prove that you've had a positive impact on that campaign, that piece of creative work, whatever it happens to be, that is the impressive thing. And you can show that you're really enthusiastic and competent at what you do. So it's really important to sort of think about that. And the reason why I've pulled the STAR method into today, this isn't about you, attending interviews, although this is a really good method to use in interviews, but it's really good for you to sort of think about the work that you're doing, even if you're doing work that isn't for a campaign or for a company or a client. You're doing sort of, you're just working through sort of portfolio things. It's good to think about, what do I need to achieve with this campaign or this piece of creative work, and how can I show that it's going to have an impact? And again, these are the things that you need to be thinking about when you're building your LinkedIn profile, when you're pulling your portfolio together. It's great to show that you've done, some interesting video work for an advertising campaign, or some interesting video work that's gone up on a website or whatever it is. But what is the impact of that video? Did it get, double the amount of views that any of their other kind of activity had? Is it having a really positive impact on that organization's business? Have you got some really positive feedback that you can pull into there? You can maybe put a quote on your LinkedIn page, or you can put it into your portfolio or wherever it is. So it's really showing that you are, going above and beyond. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking really quickly here. I hope everybody's keeping up.
Yeah, you got about 10 minutes, David. So probably, yeah.
Yeah. So again, obviously working in your full-time, securing your full-time role within the current company that you're working in, if you're an apprentice working in a company, if you want to stay at that company, it's important that you communicate that early. And again, me as a development coach, I speak to my apprentices during the apprenticeship, and if and ask them how they're getting on, what they want to do. And obviously if they want to stay on, yeah, I will say to them, just communicate that. Let your line manager know, let people know that you're loving what you do and that you'd like to stay on. And what can I do to show that I'm ready? If there are skills gaps, you want to bridge those skills gaps. So you want to be able to, learn and develop, so that when it comes towards the end of your apprenticeship and securing that full-time role is becoming, you know, um, part of the process, you want to show that you're ready, and you need to start doing that early. Because again, if you get to the end of your apprenticeship and your line manager says, well, yeah, we think you're really good at this, but you're not quite where you need to be in this area, then you could have actually bridged that gap earlier on. So communicate early. Let your line manager know what your intentions are, and actually, just ask those questions, ask for feedback. And again, I say to my apprentices, we give feedback all the time on the work that they're doing, on their projects, on their assignments, all of that sort of stuff. But it's really important that you ask for feedback within your role. So, you might have review meetings, but you need to ask for that feedback. So be proactive. Ask your line manager, how am I getting on? Are there any areas within what I'm doing where I can improve, and how do you think I can improve that? So, within feedback, it might be, yeah, you're great at this, but this needs a bit of work. If you need a bit of work, what do I need to do in order to improve on that bit of work? Can I do some training? What skills do I need to develop? So be really, really sort of that feedback is really important. And again, that last point about demonstrating business value, you know, if you are having an impact, and again, this is why I brought in that sort of star method, really try and, show that you're having an impact. If you are increasing views on particular things, or you're, increasing followers within the social media, or whatever it happens to be, then, make those notes, and demonstrate that feedback. Um, so if you don't, if it's communicated to you that you need to sort of, that you haven't got a full-time role at the end of your apprenticeship, that's absolutely fine. We at Creative Alliance, we want to help you all the way through. And again, this is about, all of those things, starting those things early, updating your portfolio, having your LinkedIn profile ready, um, building a CV. So again, you might have developed a CV to get your apprenticeship role, but obviously over that period, things have changed. And again, with that STAR technique, thinking about the activity that you've worked on, about the projects that you've been involved in, start to build those, note them down so that you can get them into your CV. Again, make sure that your CV and your LinkedIn profile sort of link together as well, so that you're telling the same message. But obviously, it's important that you're thinking about that CV as you're moving along. And again, hopefully, if you've been updating your LinkedIn profile, you've got a, almost a pre-built, list of skills and projects and all of that sort of thing that you can develop into your CV. And again, speak to your development coach or your coach, speak to colleagues about, supporting you with your CV, because it's really important that, that CV reflects who you are, and everything that you're doing within your role. um Reach out to other people about your apprenticeship credentials as well. So having an apprenticeship is fantastic. It's, you've got that experience working in a full-time role in the career pathway that you want to work in. So it's really important that you kind of utilize those apprenticeship credentials, and that you can sort of, pull that into all of your kind of, work moving forwards. Again, networks. So people that you've dealt with during your apprenticeship, alumni, so people on your, other kind of peers, other apprentices within your network, within your seminars, within sessions that you've maybe met, any kind of groups, events that you might go to are really important to building networks. A lot of the roles that I've had throughout my career in sort of creative and marketing have been through connections that I've made along the way. And that's really important. I cannot stress that enough. Networks are really valuable. So it doesn't matter whether any kind of event, whether it's a sort of a conference, or a sort of a group of apprentices meeting, or whatever that happens to be, make connections, build your network. You never know when that might happen. And, that network is also part of that whole LinkedIn scenario as well. Um, And then, what I would just say is keep learning. Obviously, in marketing, there's lots of free courses, Google certifications, Meta certifications. So, keep learning, keep building, whilst you're in your apprenticeship, but, when you're kind of moving forwards. Again, set progression goals. Don't just, think about where you want to be. Do you want to be a specialist, a manager? What role would you ideally want to go to, and look for those progression goals. And think about your reputation. you know think about how you can start maybe mentoring other apprentices, or speak to your apprenticeship provider and ask if you can maybe talk in sessions or seminars, or things like this, where you can share your ideas, because that obviously helps you to build that reputation. So there are lots of opportunities there to sort of build, and that helps to build your network, support your reputation, and move forwards, growing beyond that initial apprenticeship role. Right, I'm going to shut up now, and I don't know if there's much time for questions, but have we got any questions,
There-
James?
Yeah, there's one on here. Is it easy to is it easy to transition from apprenticeship to another company, or is it better to stay where you are?
Um, it's well, yeah, it all depends on how you want to sort of take that route. But obviously, that staying where you are is about what you want to do at that particular time. So, if it is about building particular skills, if you think you're going to develop skills and get more experience and be a more professionally recruitable asset, then it might be better to just stay where you are. But I mean, what I would suggest is you get some support around that and ask some questions. Do you think I'm ready to move into this position? And obviously that you might not want to talk to your line manager about that, but maybe speak to your development coach, speak to some other professional colleagues, and see where you're at with that. Because jumping from one company to another can be a bit of a challenge because potentially you've got to sort of you've got to prove yourself again when you get to another company. You might have been able to do that within your CV and your interview, but when you actually get there, you've got to deliver on what you've said you've been able to do. So, yeah,
I always think it's useful to have 2 years experience. That's often a bit of a sort of caveat, isn't it, for other jobs as well? You'll see a lot
yeah,
of 2 to 3 years experience for the next stage up. So our apprenticeships are 15 months, 18 months, depending on which one you do. So probably putting another 6 to 7 months. And then if you're seriously looking, you've just got that 2 years under your belt, which looks good.
it
Um,
does. And
yeah.
again, we offer progression apprenticeships as well. So it might be that you actually, you might want to stay within your organization, but you can also carry on and do another apprenticeship to sort of progress on your skills and sort of develop within that role as well.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you, David, and dead on time there for 11:30. So I really appreciate that. And
Fantastic.
yeah, Ashley, who asked the question, says thank you. I think it's Ashley. It cuts off at Ash, so I'm just guessing. But yeah, that's great. Thank you, David. Really
Right.
appreciate it.
No worries.